This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you advertise on LinkedIn, you can build lasting relationships with customers that often translate to high-quality leads, website traffic, and higher brand awareness. For a free $100 LinkedIn ad credit, go to linkedin.com/beancast. Terms and conditions apply. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Visit them on the web at transcribeme.com/beancast for up to 25% off. That's transcribeme.com. Episode 514, Billionaires Whining. For Monday, October 1st, 2018, it's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norp. Thanks for joining us. Experts have been speculating for some time about which of the social media networks will be acquired next, and who will be the buyer. But could there be a wave of several acquisitions on the horizon? And what would be the impact? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, customer preference as the sole driver for retail stocking, how the second screen distracts from primary advertising, Instagram's future, plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with marketing and innovation consultant Ms. Rose Cameron is back. Rose, welcome back.
Hello, Bob, darling. How are you?
So glad that I could get you on this program.
So glad I could make it back, and I'm sorry, I've just been traveling everywhere.
I know. You've been quite busy. Now, next up, we have the co-founder and CEO of celebrity research company Spotted, Ms. Janet Kamenos. Janet, hi.
Bob, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Well, my pleasure. Now, also joining us, we have the founder of the 6 Pixel Group, author and speaker, Mr. Mitch Joel. Hi, Mitch.
Hey, Bob. I appreciate these awkward moments where we pretend like this is the first time we're connecting.
Hey, you got to keep the magic alive somehow. Don't be giving away all our secrets.
I apologize.
And finally, we're pleased to have back the principal of Scott Monty Strategies and pragmatic futurist. Yes, he went there, Mr. Scott Monty. Hey, Scott.
Thanks, Bob.
Exactly.
Well, let's jump right into
it in post. We'll fix it in post.
A little of the pre-show banner leaking into the show. So, well, let's just jump right into the topics and forget that ever was said. Apple just completed their purchase of Shazam, which, of course, simply signals the next round of speculation about which of the other social networks will be on the next acquisition. As always, Twitter and Snap form the center of all the speculation. We're always talking about Google possibly buying Twitter, and now there's conversations about Amazon buying Snap, but there's also rumors about people being interested in buying Pinterest, always on the speculation board. You've got companies like Flipboard. Mitch, are we on the cusp of a wave of consolidation in the social space, and what would be the implications of such moves? What is your take on the current situation right now?
I don't think there's a slowdown or an acceleration. I just feel it's this constant pulse of potential acquisitions and potential consolidation. I feel like the flames were stoked a little bit more last week, less because of what happened with Shazam finally being integrated into Apple, and more because of Scott Galloway from NYU, formerly L2, who's now doing a new podcast with Kara Swisher over at Recode called Pivot. And they were working on predictions, or they're going to do predictions every episode. And his prediction was that Snapchat or Snap is going to go to Google or Amazon before the end of this year. And Kara pushed back a little bit, and they went back and forth on why, Google and Amazon, and why not Facebook or Apple. And look, I mean, these are all monstrosity of companies at this point. They're all pushing forward into every corner that makes sense and every other corner that doesn't make sense. And anybody who's got a healthy perspective on these types of organizations knows that they're not going to grow organically, and they're going to be searching for revenue anywhere and everywhere. And companies like Snap that are already public, there is a sort of discounted value because the stock market is never representative of where the business is actually at. So, I don't think that the marketplace in terms of the stock market is necessarily at all aligned with what the company's actually doing. You can look back historically on how Amazon would do in relation to the stock price. Now it's changed a little bit, but back then they were having massive growth, and the markets were pounding them. It made no sense. But I think, beyond the sort of who's going to make a go at a Twitter, a Snap, a Pinterest, or a Flipboard, I feel like the conversation needs to move a little bit away from the FANG companies, your Facebook, Apple's, Netflix, and Google of the world. And probably we need to look more at the opportunities for publishers, for big media companies. I feel a sort of healthier perspective when you talk about those companies, the Flipboards and Pinterests of the world, more akin to what we saw with, let's say, an AOL oath into Verizon.
Wait a
I feel
minute.
like
This is really interesting. I want to put a highlight on what you're saying here, because what you're essentially saying is that social media consolidation really needs to be looked at as more of a media consolidation going on in the marketplace, and that there's going to be big media consolidations where the distinction between old media or broadcast media or cable media will be blurred with that of social. Is that what you're kind of alluding to?
Yeah, it's not the only one. I think that even the major media holding companies, from WPP to IPG to Omnicom to Publicis all the way down, are going to be potentially looking at these types of companies to help backfill what is definitely a losing / switching model. If we sat down, Bob, and had coffee, which we've done, and talked about what would it look like to be a publisher in this day and age, I bet the outcome of it would look more like Flipboard and Pinterest than it would of a magazine or an audio show. So I don't think that those types of companies are off the table at all, and I think it's in their vested interest to show some form of real market and stakeholder progression by being taken seriously, and that these I don't think these companies are all going to fold into the Facebooks and Googles of the world. I just don't believe it.
Rose, what's your take on this? Do you agree with Mitch on his outlook, or do you have a different take on where the social media space is going to evolve and what the landscape will look like within a few years when it comes to all the media companies that are in play?
I think actually one of the things that Mitch said that was quite interesting to me is, WPP just made a move bringing Vimley and YR together. And you look at some of these agencies that have been traditional advertising agencies, and God love them, they are truly, truly clueless on a lot of different levels with regards to digital. And I love them, but it's the reality. And so I think they've now realized in a lot of ways that they can't necessarily create that from within, and they need to acquire it from without. And so, they have to keep themselves relevant to keep that category moving. Otherwise, what reason do I have to not just have a direct interaction with, the content providers and the social media networks? So, I think one of the things that we're looking at right now, and Mitch rightly brings it up, is how is the world of advertising and marketing going to change because of the social networks and where they're expanding to? Because everybody's in everybody else's chili right now.
Make no mistake about it. If you look even at WPP, which is my alma mater,
Same
You
here.
know, I know, Rose. I know we have history, not together, but with the same holding company. If you look at their strategic investments, WPP Digital or their investment arm, they made extensive investments in places like Vice prior to it being what it is. The Weinstein Company, which did not work out so well for reasons we all know in the media, but they were big into Snapchat. They had investments and a little piece of Facebook. So this isn't exactly me sort of breaking any eggs to make the omelet here. This is something they've done historically. They'll continue to do. I just think now, because of the consolidation in general, they're going to bring those investments or acquisitions up to a much higher public visibility.
The problem with the holding companies, though, is that they just won't pay the multiples on these tech companies that the big tech giants like Oracle, Salesforce, and Adobe will. So, I heard from multiple sources that WPP put in offers for Moat before they were acquired by Oracle for like $850 million, and they were trying to acquire them at like the $200 million level. And, if WPP were smart, I think they would try and take over a company like Pinterest, because what I hear from other advertisers is that Pinterest is really positioning their advertising suite as a prospecting solution, which is very, very valuable to WPP's clients. Prospecting is a lot harder than retargeting is. So I think, if they were smarter, they'd make a go at a company like Pinterest. WPP.
I think they're gonna definitely change that model, though, right? And I think you're right that they've historically worked off of a multiple versus growth, and what they've known as a service-based industry. I think those investment arms have been really interesting, but I think those investment arms are no longer going to be investment arms. They're going to become core to the business, and I think you're spot on. But I do believe that they will be paying those multiples because they're going to have to compete, and that's going to be the nature. And that's the nature of consolidation in general. And I think you're spot on too. The Adobes of the world, which I didn't mention, and that whole arm are going to be the whole CRM side of it. Huge, also. Totally.
But you can't discount what Janet's saying, though, about them not being willing to play the multiples, because that's been the problem.
They're going to have to play that game.
Yeah, but that's been the problem. But
that's
it's totally against the DNA of the holding companies. The holding companies have been for years plagued by things like, all our talent is going to the startup community, and meanwhile they're not willing to pay any kind of shares in the company. They're not willing to offer equity. They're not willing to offer the kind of salaries that are and expectations that go along with working in the startup community. It's almost like they're hampered by this decision-making process that's antiquated, and I can't see them getting any kind of real change going anytime soon. Rose, you were going to say,
and that's always been their issue, Bob. I mean, there's very antiquated thinking. But Janet, I love the fact that you brought up Adobe, because they're making some pretty aggressive moves right now. And, I think that the holding companies better look to Adobe about what the next generation of marketing could look like, because Adobe is already the bestie of most creatives out there. And if not the bestie, at least their first language.
And you also got to remember, we haven't even talked about things like Accenture and Deloitte, which are, Accenture's up, 20 points already in comparison to other holding companies. Not very, very pretty. But again, I think that we still have to look at the baseline, and the baseline is there's not much left for them to acquire. And I think that the VML YNR announcement actually is indicative of that. If they could play their game, they would have acquired another digital shop equivalent to a VML and launched something much bigger and much more interesting, and then maybe sort of swooped the YNR. Perhaps it's struggling, perhaps it's not. It depends on who you ask, because there's a lot of millions of dollars in there in terms of revenue into it to make it more attractive. But I think they're going to have to play this game. There's just no way companies that are worth this amount of billions of dollars in the media space can sit on the sidelines and go, well, we have our model and we'll just see what happens. That's not going to happen. These are smart people.
Scott, what's your position on what we've been discussing, and what are the benefits and liabilities to advertisers about these kind of potential moves happening? I mean, will the advertising space become more effective as a result of all of these moves that are going on, or will something have to break for things to get better?
Oh, you can count on something breaking before it gets better, or some breakaway, making the move first that forces the hands of all the other holding companies and all the other players. I think it's interesting. Most of the conversation, as I've been observing it here for the past few minutes, has been circling around media buying companies, advertising, and holding companies. But we veered away from the initial prediction that Galloway had, which was in retail. And I think if you look at major retailers that have the ability to do this, certainly Amazon makes a hell of a lot of sense with regard to Snap, and particularly with
Why,
Snap's
why is that? Before you go further, why would you say that Amazon is a particularly good fit for buying Snap, and why Snap would add anything to the Amazon architecture?
because of a few things. One, Amazon's growing advertising platform, which is starting to break up the duopoly between Google and Facebook. That's something to be considered. The other is the integration they just did with visual search with Snapchat, and I know Google has visual search as well. But this leads right into taking a piece of social media platform space and allowing people to simply shop by virtue of the picture that they take. And yeah, you could do that natively through the Amazon app at some point. I know you already can with small pieces of household goods like screws and appliances and things like that. But this opens, just as voice search is being dominated by Amazon right now, so can visual search be dominated. And if it's done, and I'm not saying through all of the social media companies, but Snap and Amazon together make complete sense. I think Pinterest, for the reasons that were mentioned before, might make sense for one of the holding companies to grab. This is not a one size fits all possibility here. There are a lot of options out there, and I think we have to take each one of them as they come along. My money is on Sears picking up MySpace.
Exactly. Bargain for both if either of them are still around. But I think you're right, Scott. The only addition I put on that is that when I think of Amazon doing the acquisition of Snapchat, I'm less thinking of them as the retailer and more thinking about them as the third horseman right now on the media side. I totally agree with you there. I just wonder if the heat that's being applied to those other verticals isn't more dominating to them. If I look at Amazon's acquisitions in the past little while, Snap, believe it or not, seems a little small for them. And not really not that they're ever on vertical, because they acquired Whole Foods and have done some pretty wild stuff out there, but just in terms of what they seem to be looking at and the dominance of this Amazon media services as it grows, I just feel like that's not the shortest play for them. I could see them doing a Shopify. I'm surprised it wasn't a Marketo. I see them playing more in that space than sort of buying these public-facing social networks right now. I think you're right down the road, but right now that doesn't feel like what they're looking for.
Well, didn't expect them in healthcare earlier this year, and they went there.
But that's what I mean. But that's what I'm saying. Like, it seems like those are more interesting vertical. Even though they did the prefab home manufacturers this week, I feel like those make more sense than the sort of obvious, like, visible social networks. Just to me, I mean, you could obviously I respect and trust you.
And but Galloway gave them until the end of next year. So I think as it plays out, and as Instagram continues to hammer on Snap in particular, we'll see how they struggle throughout the next year. We'll see what their numbers look like. We'll see what the market says.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk more about Amazon in just a second. They've announced their new retail solution, which is based entirely upon customer preference. It's an interesting play, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to tell you about a little company called LinkedIn, who is not on the acquisition block as far as I can see, because they've already been acquired. They're a Microsoft company. Well, when it comes to marketing your business, I mean, and let's face it, if you're out there and you're in business, if you're doing B2B, you have to be thinking about your marketing. And if you're thinking about marketing, it's all about reaching the right audience at the right time, right? So connecting with them with a message that resonates the most at the right time is an important factor. You want to target customers where they're engaging every single day and where they're ready to make a decision, and LinkedIn is the perfect solution for that. Look, LinkedIn is the world's largest professional network. We know that. We've heard the stats. And when you advertise on LinkedIn, you have the opportunity to build the kind of long-term relationships with your customers that you simply can't buy or get to anywhere else. Now, these are kind of relationships that often translate into things like high-quality leads, website traffic, higher brand awareness, and you've got over 500 million professionals engaging with the content on LinkedIn. So chances are you're going to find the future customers that you want among them. And let's not even forget about the targeting. Come on. I mean, LinkedIn has the marketing tools to help you target your customers with the kind of precision that isn't typical among the social networks. I mean, you can target not only things like the typical targeting, like age and location, but you can target down to things like the industry or the company name or even the job title of the specific person you want to reach. And remember, better targeting equals a message your customers care about, which in turn leads to more trust built with those same customers. And one last fact, keep in mind that 4 out of 5 customers who are on LinkedIn are decision makers at their company. Let me say that again. 4 out of 5 customers who are currently on LinkedIn are decision makers at their company. So you're building relationships with people who really matter to your bottom line. Now, I want you to get a $100 LinkedIn ad credit. That's right. We're giving you a free $100 LinkedIn ad credit and help you launch your first campaign. All you have to do is go to linkedin.com/BeanCast. That's linkedin.com/BeanCast for your free $100 ad credit. Now, terms and conditions apply. You'll find them on the site. Remember, LinkedIn, absolutely the best place to target your next campaign. And we thank them very much for their support of the show. Well, Amazon announced their latest physical retail play with a concept store built around 4-star products. The idea is simple. It's a store that only sells the most popular items on their site. Janet, is this concept revolutionary or ultimately not workable? I mean, what are the benefits and what are the potential pitfalls that you see with this model?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting. And I think at a time when other retail giants are having to cut back on their retail experiences due to inefficiencies, this is clearly it seems to be like it could be an efficient retail environment. And I think they're probably playing into the dynamic where consumers are in store and, if you're considering making a purchase, one of the first things that you do is you look on the Amazon app to see what the reviews are. So I think in one sense, I really like the idea of democratizing the brands that are featured in a store. So rather than this kind of traditional store-in-store experience that's controlled by the brand, Amazon is potentially creating an in-store experience that's driven by the consumer. So I think for a lot of consumers, especially those who are very busy, this could be perceived as an elevated experience. But there's a counter argument here, and I was recently having a conversation with an executive at TJX, and she said that they've done a lot of psychological research to see what drives the consumer experience inside TJ Maxx and Marshall's locations. And she said that we have this innate drive as hunter-gatherers that justifies the in-store experience where you're hunting basically for these discounted items within their stores. So I think like in the fashion world, I'm not so sure that I see this Amazon experience working, because I think people do like to search for finds. But I think for areas like home related items, I think it could be very effective.
Janet, I remember back in the day when I lived in Boston and the original Filene's Basement was there.
Yeah. I know exactly what
Yeah, and it was all date based. So if a piece of clothing had been there for a week, it was 25% off, 2 weeks, 50% off, and so on and so forth. And you really got good at looking for the things that were there for 3 and 4 weeks. It seems to me that Amazon, in this kind of store model where they're looking at star ratings, they might be able to do some kind of flash discounts either tied to online activity or releases or however they wanted to do it, where they could actually they could force that kind of scavenger hunt, if you will, inside some of these stores and capture that that consumer behaviorism that's so important to the retail experience.
But
I think that would be fascinating, and it could also disrupt all these fast fashion brands like Forever 21 and H&M, et cetera. It's interesting.
But do we think that it's always about marketing? Do we always think that it's about a scavenger hunt of experience when we're talking about retail? Because I think that there are a lot of really great competitors in that space on all levels of the economic scale. I mean, you've got the low end with your hunter-gatherer instincts being driven into overdrive at your Forever 21 or your H&M, and then you've got the Nordstrom Rack level where you're going for discounts on higher end merchandise.
Well,
But at the same
I
time, this isn't about discounting. This is about preference being expressed. This is about customers saying, this is what we like. And this is not only what we're willing to talk about, but this is what we're willing to say is really a great product and put our reputation on the line. So in a lot of ways, this could be about premium. This could be about adding additional value to the retail experience that's kind of supersedes that hunter-gatherer. We're out there to try to get the best find, the best detail, the best discount. We're out there to actually just get the best merchandise.
I agree with you totally, Bob. Yeah, I don't think that this is at all falling into the TJX category by a long shot. I think this is a prototypical Amazon play. Only the best survives, the best stuff gets to the top. What I find interesting is this announcement coming very hot on the tails of the 3,000 potential Amazon Go stores, which are their sort of cashierless, pay less, payment less stores that you'll pop in and out on. Amazon, even with the acquisition of Whole Foods, we talked a bit about this earlier, is looking more and more like a traditional retailer. They are using, to me, this is all about data. They are using this data to know where to be. I mean, if you think about really what is retail is a big real estate play. They are figuring out exactly where they need to be for the right type of customer and the right type of size. I think this is a play that further pushes the logistics plan for them. If they need facilities in a very densely populated area, like let's say New York City, why not have the front end be quality goods and products that people can come in and get? I don't want to dismiss the power of Prime here that offers free shipping and the subscription models that fall within that. Think even about Amazon as a brand play with what they're doing with Amazon Basics, which score very, very highly in terms of people's satisfaction. So it's another play to bring the Basics brand and have it aligned with other brands that are competing very, very well. I believe very strongly that this is a big push for Amazon to truly demonstrate what e-commerce looks like in store. You go into the store, you want to buy a cable, you want to buy something else. They don't have everything. You can order it. It'll be back at your place by the time you get there within the hour, within the day. So I think this is more of a play of Amazon demonstrating not just brand dominance for some of the brands that will be featured in this 4-star and up Amazon store, but also the Amazon brand dominance. And I think this is just stage one of them using data to test exactly how this plays together.
Mitch, I agree, and totally get you, Janet, with the people who like to do the search. But I think that this is going into the hardcore Amazon strength of efficiency and convenience. So if I want to find the best X, don't make me, for God's sake, search online for it for 20 hours. I'm going to walk into this store. I'm going to play with it a little bit. So I could see some relatively high involvement products being really hot in this area because you want to touch them. You want to feel them. You want to actually see ergonomically how they work with you. And they've done that for you in that curation. I think the big game changer here, I had an interesting conversation with one of the largest US retailers recently. And I was saying to him, where's the tipping point? Where's the tipping point going to be between retail and online? And what he said to me is, Rose, it's very, very close. And what we're going to use online for is shortlisting what should actually be on the retail shelves. And that's exactly what Amazon is doing. And where the big brands should be highly concerned is that there are a lot of brands in categories that really stretch the globe that are starting to to creep up and surprise the larger brands because they've created this entire universe of communities online who are huge advocates, and they're the ones that the large stores are watching on Pinterest and saying, wow, this product here that I've never heard of and whose rep has never come to visit me is getting huge attention on Pinterest. Let's check them out. And so you're going to find a lot of brands that previously felt kind of fat and happy are going to have these guys coming from below who they've never even heard of before, but who have these online cult followings. And they're going to be what's featured in the store.
There's several things about...
I would push it further, Bob. Sorry, I would push it a little bit further even, and think about what's happening right now. Most sort of established legacy retailers know that whether they're selling online or not, they need an Amazon channel as well. So I think they're going to sort of fall into that. They're going to fall prey actually to the exact comments that Rose said. I think that that's a profound statement from that retailer. The other side of it, though, that I don't think that this retailer is really thinking about or paying attention to is the mass rise of these DTC brands. And the other thing that these stores are going to provide is a showcase to actually see these.
Yep.
You know, Warby Parker had to get physical at one point. Casper will get physical at one point. But until these brands do, this is going to be some major co-op dollars coming into play here because these brands store very highly on their rating side. They're going to want to use Amazon as a channel to boost sales. And this is going to be their little sidestep to be able to do physical retail. I wouldn't diminish the power of the DTC in this framework at all.
But a lot of what retailers, a lot of the retail operations out there depend upon the brands to give them the special discounts for bulk purchasing. So, I mean, for me, that seems to be the weak link in this. To build a store that's entirely built around customer preference, which is going to highlight a lot of these DTC brands that are not paying the big kickbacks and helping the retailers to kind of minimize that razor thin margin level that they have to deal with all the time. I don't know that this is completely sustainable for any other retailer except for Amazon, you know, and it only works as a showcase. It doesn't work as an opportunity to actually move product as much as it is to showcase brands and give you a chance to maybe physically touch them, physically lay on them if it's a mattress, physically use the product. And then go and do your research online and continue the cycle of moving retail onto the web as opposed to dealing with it in the store. Am I wrong about that? I mean, it's just like, it seems like this model doesn't work for anybody but Amazon because of the fact that the big brands are providing so much incentive to make sure that they're front and center and that they're prominently displayed in retail environments.
I think all brands will pay to play. I think that they certainly will if the model proves successful. And I think it's a very different model in the world of Amazon because as much as they are cutting deals like traditional retailers have in terms of helping big brands stock and make sure that there's the ability to ship their product faster to the consumers, I think it's a very, very different beast because they don't have the infrastructure of physical retail that they're paying for as the traditional retailers do, and they're not beholden to those old models anymore. And again, I've got some inside scoop on some brands that are using Amazon as a major channel at the retail level, and a lot of these brands are even sort of hesitating twice about selling on their own as in a sort of why bother scenario, because no matter what they're paying in terms of co-op, and Amazon does force you to do co-op on media services, and I'm sure physical too, it's still worth it because they're Amazon, and there is no other retail to a lot of people these days.
But doesn't that negate the whole idea about this being a user preference store? Because what you're saying to me,
will be.
Well, it's based on user preference as long as that brand is willing to kick in some money for some display. I mean, I'm not saying that's...
No, I'm saying Amazon's not going to approach them unless they've got 4+ up, and when they approach them, they're going to make them pay to play. I think it's going to be totally legit. I don't think it's going to be masked.
All right. So, Janet, you were trying to get a word in, so...
Yeah, no, it's all good. I do think that this environment is certainly going to benefit the Amazon private label brands. I think it's just a really tough time to be a brand right now in general because, like, amidst price cuts and private labeling, it's like, you know, people don't care about the brand itself anymore. And I understand the concept of Amazon only offering the co-op advertising in this type of retail environment to brands who have 4 stars and up. I just don't know how limited that is, because I don't see brands participating in co-op advertising. If I don't see the model working if they don't have a 4 stars or above, just because the consumer is dictating the experience. So,
Bob, can I throw one more thing in here that
Please,
I think
please
is
do.
really important, which is location, location, location. And I think one of the things that we really have to look at is, where is Amazon going to put these 4-star stores? Because, as you know, I live in a university town, and what I'm seeing is Whole Foods is moving in. The Amazon distribution centers opened up here. And, you know, we've seen at the university a 30% increase in all mail because of Amazon Prime. Okay. So what they're priming is an entire generation to be dependent upon them for their purchases. And I've seen this as I go around and I do my ethnographies, that more and more of the people, I walk into their homes and it looks like they've recently just moved in. And I'm like, what's with all the boxes? And it's Amazon.
So right now, just to be clear to everybody listening, the test is happening in Soho, and it's very much pop-up model, so no long-term leases. And that's where I was going originally with this whole data will dictate the real estate, because I agree, like that's the location. They'll just know where to be. I'm going to hesitate to guess they're going to go outside of heavily populated urban areas that are I think they're going to go to a place where they can ship someone fast to, like within an hour or so too, just to really add the volume to it. I don't think they're going to immediately start going out to the edges. I don't feel that.
I'll put my 5 cents on this one, Mitch. Okay, I only go
Wait.
5p, but because I'm actually seeing them targeting university towns.
I believe
with
that.
a variety of their different holdings, and it's because they're priming a market for long-term life.
I buy it.
Yeah, so, you know, they've set up the infrastructure. All they need to do, to your point, is pop up the bloody thing.
Well, we're going to move on and we're going to talk next about second screens. Second screen advertising has been such a big buzzword for so many years, but apparently it's distracting people from the actual ads that they should be paying attention to. We're going to get to that and discuss whether that's a good thing or a bad thing in just a moment. But first, a word from AdRoll.
After months of strategizing and prepping budgets and looking at how we're going to position ourselves in the market, I didn't have anyone to fall back on. And I remember pulling the lever for all those campaigns, biting my nails, and just staring at the computer pretty much the entire day. This was the moment where, okay, we hired this guy to do exactly what he's saying. Now it's up to him to deliver. Trying to figure out the best way to serve ads to our customers. To me, it was a black box. AdRoll came in and said, we should target these users at this cadence, this frequency. We doubled our revenue based on what we were projecting for November, December. Succeeding after I've put myself on the line like that, it does give me confidence.
To find out how TeePublic and 37,000 other brands grow their businesses with AdRoll, visit adroll.com/BeanCast. That's adroll.com/BeanCast.
Well, eMarketer presented findings that second screen efforts, while effective and popular for brands, ultimately diminished the effectiveness of the first screen efforts, which is an interesting finding. I'm not sure I completely understand it, but Scott, while admittedly this proves that digital and mobile advertising works, what does it say about creating 360-degree digital experiences that embrace the consumer 100% when it's distracting people by having so many screens talking to them? So what's your take on this situation?
Well, speaking of popping up the bloody thing, I suppose this is an example of be careful what you wish for. You know, in the one case, we were told with the advent of YouTube and the social networks and all the rest that our television advertising should be driving people to a social experience or to a web-based experience. And now that they're there, you know, how do you get them back to the television? And, you know, it's not just the calls to action that have driven this. It's simple human behavior. You know, I watch my kids who are, just inveterate viewers of mostly YouTube and Instagram, and we'll pop on a movie during family movie night and the second screens pop out. And it's not because they're looking to engage with any ads. It's just that's what they do. And if something gets boring during the movie, they're looking at their second screen. And you better bet that in an advertising medium, we have to be engaging. We've seen Google go all the way down to 6-second ads and below. But I don't know what it's going to take to get people to disassociate with what has become a simple human behavior, whether it was incurred by advertising in the first place or not.
Well, yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily incurred by advertising. I think that what it comes down to is that people, is like you said, they're naturally drawn to these second screens. It's the content that they want to involve themselves with. But I think that this drive to have 360 experiences doesn't make sense when you're trying to get them to focus on one thing when you're trying to advertise. When you're trying to market to someone, you need their focus, their attention. And that doesn't come from flipping them from one screen to the next. That comes from making what they're actually watching as compelling as possible so that their attention is given to you, that you're actually creating awareness or driving an action. Mitch,
yeah, it's a very flat-footed argument that the media companies are making. They're basically saying that because people are distracted, it's limiting our success. And I think what's actually happening is a bigger challenge. And the challenge, as I see it, is quite simply this. We've seen media sales as placement equals the premium you pay. And I believe that the new premium should be on attention, where the attention is, not placement at all. And so if you take that as a thought, it's going to play out even in mobile. We know by the simple technology in these devices, if that screen is upside down, forward, if someone's holding, if they're looking at it, they can even test for basic symptoms of ALS based off of where the phone is and how it's shaking and or being held. So I think that there's going to be a more macro shift that's going to happen very soon. I've seen some pretty amazing technology in that space to make that argument that placement will not be the premium, that the premium will be paid by attention. The other thing I would tell you on this sort of 360 is it's 360 degrees of stupidity. Because if you think about media channels like radio, print, or TV, they are fundamentally passive for the consumer. They're just sort of passively taking in the content. If you move to the second screen, which is typically a mobile, it's a laptop, it's a tablet, these are active platforms.
Correct.
And your engagement in the media format and how you engage in both the content and the advertising is fundamentally different. And by the way, we could rewind this and go back to the early 2000s when I was talking very specifically about this, how the fundamental failure of online advertising, the CPM model, is off of the fact that they were creating very passive types of engagements, these banner ads, in what are active channels. People were trying to actively search, click, do, build, create, and we were just, let me interrupt you with an ad that's very, very passive. Yes, you could click through if you wanted a landing page, but that's not the real engagement. And so it is that exactly that's going on. So they're talking about cross-device targeting as if it's in vogue, but it's not, because it's a terrible user experience because they're not embracing the active and or the passive.
Go ahead, Janet. No, you go, Lovey.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, the upside with the active engagement on the second screen is so great in comparison to the passive engagement with the first screen that it's worth the distraction, because for the advertiser, with the second screen, you're not only deepening the consumer engagement, but it's also a great way to learn about your audience because you're collecting more data on them. So,
but we've only really seen that be true, by the way, if you think about it, like at search. Why? Because you're already actively searching for something. So when the ad comes up, it's symbiotic to the experience. Also, email would be another example. You signed up for something, you're proactively willing to take it in, and as it comes in, you're consuming that media the same way you can otherwise. On regular online advertising or mobile advertising, total flop.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. Go on, Rod.
Cheers, Janet. I think what everybody's missing is that this is not the second screen.
Yes.
This is the first screen. And it is the primary screen. And the moment that primary screen starts delivering something, it will win over whatever the other screen is that's not traveling with that human being and an extension of their own behavior.
I've
Okay?
started
Yeah,
to
boy, do we
disagree.
see-
I've
we sound like
started.
the olds, you're
Look,
right.
I've started
Yep.
to disagree. I've started to disagree with that characterization of the mobile screen as being the first screen or the TV being the first screen. The first screen is whichever screen you're paying attention to and whichever holds your attention at that moment, because people are different. Not everybody is into the same type of activity, and to call one the first screen for all audiences makes zero sense. It really comes down to where is the attention being given, and that's the screen that needs to be focused on. And I think it goes back to Mitch's point that it's like we need to start characterizing advertising not based on placement and time, but based on whether or not the attention is being given to that particular screen at any given moment. But I'm sorry, I had to get on my.
I'll wrestle with you on this, Bob.
Okay, go for it. But you had a point to make. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I had to get on my soapbox for that one.
It's okay. The thing, I've been doing a social experiment here at the house, okay? Just, watching when somebody's going to turn on the big screens. And I've got 3 big screens in my house. I'm not one of these people just lets them run. It's been 6 months. It's been 6 months. Everybody here is on their phone. They're watching everything on their phone. My daughter turned on the telly because there was a Penn State game. But, I was like, time out. But this is what I think we need to start looking at is, to your point, Mitch, attention, absolutely. But nothing has the connection with us like our phones do. I'm sorry. God, that was bad English. Because they are now literally our self-quantification device. They are an extension of our senses. And I've been to plenty of homes, doing my ethnographies, going out, meeting the people, and the wallpaper is the big screen. This thing is constantly running in the background. You have to tell people to turn the bloody thing off. It's not polite, but it's ambient noise now. And that involvement, that intention level is really not given to it at all. It has become this gray zone. And absolutely, there are probably a couple of generations now who are going to sit down in front of it and all the rest of it. But I think the really important thing for all of us to note is the shift away from the big screen, except for scheduled appointments with it. And otherwise it becomes almost like wallpaper, like this little friend in the room that's making noise so you're not alone, but you're not really paying attention to it. It's actually your partner after 40 years of marriage is what it is.
But
So basically, to further that, Bob, just because there's
Sure.
a piece of data that I actually just tossed into a recent presentation that did sort of validate some of this conversation, which is, and again, I hope I'm not misquoting, I'm trying to pull it up as we speak here, but it was something like 89% usage of mobile devices in home on its way to toppling TV as the dominant screen.
Yep.
So I think that this idea of even it being ambient and in the background, that might be. I wish I could pull this piece of data up, because if I would, I'd share it with you. But there's a general consensus that even the sort of wallpaper model, almost irrelevant to the value of it, because it speaks to the fact that they're, again, it's limited success because it's completely distracted by everything else. So who cares? On or not, who cares?
Well, yeah, and I think this conversation goes much beyond whether or not TV is still relevant, whether or not it's background noise, because this goes into the whole 360-degree strategy as a whole and looks at it in a very critical light. We could have a live event on the quad at a major university, and if it's activating some kind of mobile device, is it taking away the opportunity to connect with people in a real world environment in favor of dealing with this mobile device, which has so much attention already? It just kind of calls into question this idea that we need to engage people via all their devices all the time. We need to flip from screen to screen with them. We need to flip from experience to screen, from online to offline. It seems to me that the more important thing is to get their attention and keep their attention on the screen or the action or the activity that they're doing right now. And if we're not doing that,
problem
we're
with
not
that-
effective.
Yeah, but the problem with that is this sort of active passive model, which I know gets people excited when I talk about it. The problem is on mobile or tablets, you can be both. And then the model for being passive on mobile is typically, let's call it a YouTube, let's call it a Netflix. YouTube, if you look at, YouTube Premium, suddenly the way in which you even ingest passive advertising changes because the model of the interruption of the ad doesn't really float in that. And you saw that a little bit in the pushback when Netflix started testing some of those little commercials. You see it in people wanting to move to pay for a little bit a month to have, their own sort of control over this. And I think that consumer habituation is going to be more disruptive than whether TV is relevant or not. It's more about who cares if TV is relevant or not. The question is, how are they consuming passive video? And if the answer is in these type of platforms like mobile, which it looks like, or tablets, their expectation of advertising consumption is fundamentally different. And that causes the same problem we had back in the 2000s, again, getting back to banner ads and websites.
Well, we got to roll this into our last topic of the evening. The founders of Instagram have officially parted ways with parent company Facebook, highlighting rumors of dissatisfaction over the direction that the photo sharing site has been taking. Rose, does Facebook need to be more concerned about their moves on their fastest growing platform? I mean, this is obviously a crown jewel of the Facebook portfolio right now. Does it spell any kind of potential problems down the line that the founders themselves have walked away from this?
I think that what it really, Instagram will continue and Facebook will continue to pay for its advancements, etc. I think the bigger issue Facebook needs to face is Mark just got back from this tour of the United States talking to their consumers. I think boyfriend needs to turn around and talk to some of the people in his own office.
Yeah, because this is not the first. I mean, the WhatsApp founders have walked away.
Yep.
So
there are plenty who have walked. Okay. And for a man who started one of the most innovative products that's, shaped the world, he really doesn't know how to work with other innovators. And what each of them has cited was they come on board, they think that they're going to be there with a like-minded peer. They start, they want to continue their innovation or their passion or their mission, however you want to say it, and they find that door is shut. And they feel stymied, and all of a sudden, all of these other issues are coming into play. That these people who are very purposeful, mission-driven people go, wait a minute, this is not why I created this product in the first place, or why I'm focusing my energy on creation in the first place. I'm out of the pool.
Yeah,
I'll take a really contrarian view here.
Please, Mitch.
I think I've been through acquisitions, and I can tell you 6 years is a really long time. And kudos to those two for sticking out 6 years. You'll see very few founders stick through 6 years post anything. That's a lifetime. These are young people, so we're talking about a big chunk of their lives. There's a dissatisfaction. Really, dissatisfaction. Stories was introduced. Videos were introduced since they were acquired. They've had huge growth. They've been able to, because of that infrastructure, be able to be.
Mitch, did we lose you?
Instagram for a while. They've got hello? Am I here?
You're back. You're back. Hello? Keep talking.
So, if you talk about the dissatisfaction with problems, we don't like ads, we don't like data. Well, that's what they were bought for. They were bought for data and targeting. They bought them primarily, especially Instagram, because at the time they were mobile first and dominating on photos, which was a place where Facebook was challenged with because they were still very much transitioning from desktop to mobile. I look at this and go, what did they expect? Facebook paid $1 billion for them, and that $1 billion has turned into pure gold for them. 1 billion users. Now they're at, I think they were doing something like $1 billion. They're basically paying $1 per user at this point, which is really good. This is going to be $6 billion in revenue this year. The analysts are calling by 2020, this could be $20 billion Instagram, which would be a quarter of Facebook's current revenue. I look at this and I go, I don't know. Yeah, I think the two of them are just basically saying we've done our time and it's time for us to do something, take our money and run. But you sell for $1 billion to Facebook and you don't expect data, targeting, and ads, then you're the fool.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, the average founder only stays at the acquirer for less than 3 years anyway, and it has been 6 years. And tech founders are just, inherently autonomous, curious individuals. So I think there were two, and this has already been said basically, but there were two dynamics at play here. One is that the founders don't like to see their baby sustaining. They don't want to feel like the acquirer is turning it into a sole kind of revenue engine and forgetting what the purpose of the app was for users, which was to enjoy, in Instagram's case, like to enjoy and share photography. But the second dynamic was that they're just probably bored at this point. Like they've accomplished everything that they could accomplish there, and it's time to move on and do something new.
Well, part of the rumblings I've heard, and having been someone who is inside of a big corporation, I could absolutely see this, is that the founders weren't given as much autonomy as they thought, and that Instagram in particular was being treated like a division of Facebook rather than like its own independent standalone within the company, and that irked them. And they wanted to continue pushing in a certain way. We all know the WhatsApp soap opera as it's played out. But to Mitch's point, when you get paid this much money, you do you do automatically give up some of that autonomy. And kudos to them for seeing it through this far and for making the moves that they did. But what'll really be interesting is to see what they've got on the docket next.
Yeah, even the WhatsApp news really, aggravated me. After an acquisition of what was it, $19 billion, for him to say this is not what I expected. What did you think he was giving you $19 billion for? Data, access, and the ability to target these people. That is the business model. No one has shied away from it. Now, whether or not Mark is a great coworker or great team builder, I think it's almost a separate discussion, because it's very different when you're acquired versus when you're working for them. And I don't think that any of these founders have a foot unless they start handing money back. Which, by the way, the WhatsApp founder left $850 million on the table. Well, it's kind of not feeling bad for the guy after a $19 billion acquisition.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought his commentary was offensive. Like he was, urging consumers on Twitter to delete Facebook. It's just ungrateful.
I think he should delete his bank account and give the money to charity.
Yeah. But it poses an interesting question, because you see this rise of Instagram where, it's got a whole generation behind it, and Facebook kind of coming down with regards popularity. What if you're not the most popular kid in the room anymore, but you're still the one with the wallet?
Yeah, but 2013, to go back to 2013, when Snapchat said no to Facebook for the $2 or $3 billion, at that moment in time, you had Snapchat dominating 49%ish, and I have this data because I speak about it a lot, of the entire photo sharing space. This is pre-video. You got to remember, it's 2000 and whatever I just said it was, 2013. Instagram was 7%, and Facebook was basically the rest. I think Flickr had 1% at that point, or something minimal like that. And so the truth is at the time, Instagram was in a very precarious situation. I really think that people forget that Instagram was not that much when it was acquired by Facebook. Mm-hmm. They've experienced their growth and their popularity partly because of this acquisition, and their ability to really push Snapchat back on their heels is you goddamn right, completely connected to Facebook's power.
Well, with that, it's time for the Ad Fail 5. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Rose Cameron. She is a consultant for hire. You can find her on LinkedIn. But tell us what's going on in your world, Rose. What would you like to promote?
Well, I have become, in the absence of him using a mobile phone, the human mobile phone for Martin Lindstrom. As you probably know, he and Ariana Huffington have a wager that he can live without one. He does, because I carry one. So I'm working with him all over the world. It's been an amazing adventure, and I actually am so incredibly fulfilled right now, I cannot even begin. So if there are companies out there who are interested in actually, reintroducing themselves to their customers and understanding why their customer sats ratings have dropped by double digits, and they're interested in bringing them back up through innovation, please look at martinlindstrom.com, contact him, and you can be assured that both Martin and I will work on your projects.
That sounds really great. Definitely check that out. Next up, we have Janet Kamenos. You can find her at spotted.us. That's the home of celebrity research firm Spotted, which I will let Janet tell you about and let her do all the promotion she would like. So take it away, Janet.
Thank you, Bob. Yep, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Spotted. I founded the company about 3 years ago. We've been named the authority in the celebrity research space by outlets like Adweek, Forbes, CNBC, and more than 50 others. And we assess the risk profile of celebrity talent, and then based on more than 100 proprietary metrics, we measure the alignment between a celebrity and a brand. And it's fascinating because especially over the last 12 months, the risk component has become a very core tenet of our offering, just because given today's social climate in the wake of Me Too, every little move these celebrity endorsers make is so highly scrutinized. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, loved having you on the program. Now, next up, we have Mitch Joel. You can find him at 6pixels.com. That's the home of, well, I'm not sure what this is the home of. It's the home of a podcast. It's the home of a couple podcasts, probably. It's home of his speaking engagements. It's the home of a lot of things. So tell us, what's going on in your world, Mitch? What would you like to promote?
I think you just did it. Thanks. That's basically, I mean, I'm a glutton for punishment. I've got 640 episodes of 6 Pixels of Separation still going every Sunday. I publish an interview with somebody interesting, dynamic, or someone who's got an interesting book out. I still write at a frenetic pace over there. And basically, anybody's interested in anything that's come out of this mouth, feel free to go to 6pixels.com. And there's a lot more of it there, unfortunately, for some people.
Yeah, it's always a great site, so I definitely recommend it. And last but not least, Scott Monty. You can find him at scottmonty.com. That's the home of Scott Monty Strategies. Really, really great to see what you're doing over on your site, Scott, and all the things that you're doing in the newsletter and all the other ways that you keep in touch with people. So tell us, what's going on in your world? What would you like to promote?
Well, thanks, Bob. Having recently reestablished my sole consultancy, I am working with brands and executives on just helping them to move at the speed of customers, but also keeping a solid view on the past. You know, everybody gets distracted by shiny objects, and I like to keep people focused on the true north. And I do that through a lot of historical and literary allegories that everybody can understand. And a lot of times that creeps its way into my newsletter and podcast on the Full Monty. And not that your listeners need another podcast to listen to, but it's only 5 minutes a week. It's designed to be short and concise and to save you time, just like the Full Monty newsletter.
And my show is designed to waste a lot of time, so that's really great. We kind of bookend each other. I've got an hour, you got 5 minutes. Yeah, Scott's stuff is really amazing. You should definitely check it out. He's one of the best when it comes to analyzing and offering insight into the marketing and business world. So definitely check out his stuff. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me, and you can even find out how to advertise on the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. Don't forget, transcription is now available for the BeanCast. You can find it on the site. And our partner, transcribeme.com, is offering a special deal to anybody out there who would like transcription services. Just check it out at transcribeme.com/BeanCast, and you can get some transcription services done. Now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And first up, the battle between brands and their media agencies, Rose, just got a whole lot stickier. It's gone federal. There's a federal probe into the matter now over this whole thing about kickbacks to media agencies and every other kind of transparency issue that happened over the last few years. So is this a thing that the holding companies need to worry about besides the fact that their stock prices all took a hit because of it?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, I think there have been several cases of large brands leaving their agencies because they've questioned the kickbacks and the ambiguity behind, how agencies make money. So yeah, watch this space. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, it's not the first time that these agencies have been investigated. It was 2 years ago. They were investigated because of rigging of these, commercial contracts. So every time they get investigated, they lose trust with their advertisers.
This has happened in other parts of the world, and now it's coming here.
Well, next up, apparently you can't say anything you want when you're a CEO, Scott. That's what Elon Musk is finding out the hard way as the SEC formalized their call to remove him from Tesla over fraud allegations. Now, I heard that the board is completely behind him and supporting him. It's doubtful that he will be forced out, but there is the possibility of criminal charges.
He stepped down. It was on the news right before, Bob.
No
he stepped
way.
Down
Okay.
he stepped down as chairman, not CEO, and he's paid the SEC $20 million.
Okay.
Funding secured.
Wow.
There you go.
Wow. It's just like, talk about an ad fail that came true immediately.
It just goes to show you the ROI of social media.
I think the most humiliating part, though, is that he used, in his tweet, he used the number 420, which is the annual cannabis holiday, to try and impress his girlfriend, who's a pop star, Grimes. So,
how sad. How sad.
Well, next up, Weight Watchers responded to the wellness trend by rebranding as WW, Mitch. The only trouble is the CEO in an interview couldn't seem to explain what the new WW logo actually stood for. We know it doesn't stand for Weight Watchers, and we know it doesn't stand for whatever their new slogan is, so what the heck are they doing here?
He stumbled. He couldn't figure out if it's Wonder Woman or World War. He got confused.
I think it's a clever co-branding experiment with Buffalo Wild Wings, who has dropped the buffalo.
It's supposedly it's wellness that works, guys. Yeah.
No, she said that it didn't, right? Am I alone in this? It is a
done Weight Watchers, Bob.
Bob's counting points right now.
That explains.
Well, I'm going to move on to the next topic because that's closer to what I actually consume, beer. An American beer brewer, Scofflaw, announced on Twitter that in partnership with UK brewer Brewdog, they would get UK drinkers beered up redneck style completely free of charge. But there is a hook. You have to be a Trump supporter. Unfortunately, Janet, Brewdog knew nothing of this plan and responded that Scofflaw's beer would be sent back, and then Scofflaw threw their PR agency, Frank, under the bus, saying it was all their fault and they had no knowledge that this was actually happening. This is one of the biggest little PR disasters I've heard of in a long time. It seems like nobody can get to the bottom of why this tweet went out, and the effects have been just devastating for them. So what's your take on this one?
Yeah, I mean, at a bare minimum, it definitely sounds like Scofflaw's PR agency, Frank, needs better management protocols, because a single junior employee, supposedly, of a pretty well-established PR firm was able to put together that idea, come up with the idea, draft a press release, distribute it to several thousand journalists, and there was never any internal or external approval. So they need to fix that.
Bob, we keep saying that the agency model has fundamentally changed. I don't think it's changed at all. Here you go. They're throwing the agency under the bus. There's your model.
And quite frankly, the fact that this child thought that there was a single Brit who would actually be a Trump supporter blows my mind.
Well, last but not least, Unilever CEO Paul Pullman was on a panel this past week to share about his company's commitment to conscious capitalism, when another panelist pointed out that the company is still marketing skin lightening products in India. Oh, Rose, I read this and I just like, whoa, it's just like they had to have known this was coming in terms of the questions.
Yeah. Now, if I remember correctly, though, the ad that they put out there was a pretty old ad. But even so, you got to say, dude, if you're going to be committed to these things. It cannot be. In the age of digital, you've got to research it and actually see what of your portfolio is laughing directly in the face of what you're saying, and be ready for it. I actually thought he pulled out pretty quickly, and he did a rather good job. But even so, these people who go for purpose-built brands and conscious consumption, all the rest of it, they've really got to look at their own companies first.
Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag AdFail5. That's pound AdFail and the number 5. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an iTunes listener, we've also provided a direct link to the iTunes Music Store, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory of iTunes. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.